Well, I'll share my thoughts, and Chief and Deputy Chief, I don't think you'll be too surprised on where I'm at on this. And so, Mayor and Council, I really struggle with this one. I really do. It's one thing to regulate a building and the noise produced by a building. It's another thing to try to regulate and enforce a moving vehicle sound. And so I have a few comments, Mayor and Council, please bear with me, I won't be long. But my opening comment I like to make is just my struggles with the opening of the agenda item and the quote from the email that says, quote, "I can't count the number of times I have been assaulted by blasts of noise from cars spewing their deep and threatening engine." I'm guessing that next word is vibration. "Their abuse can be heard, even felt from blocks away." I don't know why that really bothers me. I think maybe it's partially because my family comes from a low-income neighborhood of Jerusalem, and we've kind of, built our lives up with nothing. And to me, that kind of quote, in my opinion, has a lot of privilege in that complaints, and I really struggle with that. It really bothers me, personally, right? And Mayor, I see your head nodding, and I appreciate that. Officer time, when I did ride-alongs, Chief, with our officers, I really saw they really do care, right? They're great people that really do believe and care about the community, but we were responding to calls that were low level across town, dog off a leash in Buffalo Park. We're at the opposite side of town, and it's 20 minutes ago because we had other priorities, but then we still had to respond to it because it's in the queue, right, Chief? And it's just like, by the time we got there, it was 40 minutes after the fact, and we tried to find the person who called, and 20, 30 minutes went by before that officer was able to take the next call in the queue. And so I really struggle with us responding to these complaints and encouraging our community to complain like this, and that we're going to actually engage with that. When I speak to chiefs across the state, and even at times at the national level in different states, they tell me they don't respond to calls like these. Maybe not the noise one, but like the dog off leash and this lower level, levels of service calls. They just don't have the time to respond to them. But yet, we take pride in that, and I respect that, Chief. I do. I see the value in it, but I just hate to see us keep adding to the list of things we respond to, given how short-staffed we are and the burnout that we have is real. I just, in talking to officers, I think that I don't feel comfortable adding more to their plate, especially things like this. And then let's see. I don't personally think having officers chasing down vehicles that are too loud is appropriate. I just don't. And then, okay, I'm almost done my comments. I have significant concerns about who this is going to more significantly impact. And I have a fear that this is going to negatively impact lower income populations in our community. And I really have concerns that that's who's going to really get hit by this. And I also have concerns about the certification and the continued recertification costs, right? We have turnover. This is not cheap. It's going to add up. And I really struggle with that. And then I was glad to see the email from the resident, Duffy, saying that she too had issues with the financial drain. And although I know she wants to see this addressed, I was glad that her and I were on the same page about the cost being a concern. And we're neighbors. We live next to each other. I hear the same car that they're talking about. It bothers me too, but you know what? I live with it. I hold my breath. I count to 10. The car's gone. Life goes on. No big deal, right? I'm grateful to have a home in Flagstaff. I'm privileged to have a home in Flag that I'm renting, right? So it's one thing to regulate and enforce noise at a location like a structure. It's another thing to be chasing down vehicles that we call are too loud. I'm not supportive of this. If you can't tell where my comments are going, I appreciate the work that's gone into this. And maybe I'd be more supportive if our staffing was at closer to 100%. But I just don't see the need to be moving forward with this as a standalone. With all due respect, I think the structure is another conversation that I think I'm more supportive of. But this one for me is I'm just not in favor. So thank you for hearing me out, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. And yeah, just to, I agree on multiple levels with you on this ordinance. To me, this just provides a tool in terms of, you know, if we're already having a vehicle looking for speeders through the neighborhood and have a sound mic on it at the same time, we know at what time of day some people are coming down with their loud, obnoxious, adjusted vehicles that intentionally put on the glass pack or whatnot to make noise, then you know what, I don't think that's adding on. I don't think we're going to be, you know, responding to somebody zooming down the street and 20 minutes later coming down to try to address the situation, but it allows some level of notification to individuals who may be there while the police are already there. And I also have concerns with the, you know, potentially impacting those that may not be able to afford to replace their muffler and so forth. But with this ordinance, we're providing some discretion, so that way we're not targeting individuals that can't afford to repair their vehicle, but rather those that intentionally upgrade their vehicle to make noise obnoxiously. So I agree with a lot of your points, and I absolutely see where you're coming from, but I don't think how it's written and how we're approaching it is going to be targeting those who just can't afford to upgrade their vehicle. It's those who are upgrading it to be obnoxious. And I also don't see us trying to respond to calls that, hey, somebody just drove down my street, can you go track them down because they were noisy, but rather the police are already there. They have the device in hand just along with their speedometer to be able to, you know, potentially address the situation, and especially when some of these cases are repetitive at a certain time of day, it may allow us a tool to notify that individual, be there when the case occurs, and hopefully, you know, calm down the situation.
Mayor?
Yes,
Follow-up?
Councilmember Schwenning.
Thank you. So I hear you, and I appreciate that. I agree with a lot of what you said. My understanding, Mayor, is it's not just that the officer, if there's an officer there and there's a car going by, they can pull out their sound radar and check for the sound levels, right? If they're equipped and, you know, trained, et cetera. But that's one component that you talked about. The other component, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty sure I understood you correctly in that if someone from my neighborhood or any neighborhood picks up the phone and says, hey, there's a fast car or a car making too much noise, that gets added to the queue, Mayor. And if there's not an officer at the site at that location, an officer will address that queue item. And they will show up 10, 20, 30 minutes later. They will make contact with the resident that called in and say, hey, we are here. We're doing a report, or we're just checking in and touch base, let you know that we're here. We've made contact. We've tried to address the issue. And so that might take 40 minutes of an officer's time at the end of the day, or 20 minutes. I don't know. Just depends on the situation. But if there was a way, Chief, to separate the two and make it what the mayor was saying, I'd be more in favor of that. If an officer is there and they have another tool in their tool chest, right, Mayor? Like, to your point, that's great. But if we're responding to a call 20, 30 minutes later, I just feel like it's not a good use of our limited resources.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni, and I agree with that. If Chief, if you'd like to speak to that fact.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of council. So we do try and respond to every call that comes in, and we find that when we don't, your emails start blowing up, and we have to respond to it.
Really?
After
I've
the fact.
never known that.
Anyway, so it's just better to try and do it on the front end. We may not be there in time to address the issue, but the residents will still feel heard, and over time, officers get to know who's in their beat, who the problems, where the problems are, and usually the speeding problems, in some cases, I think they're going to overlap with the loud vehicles. I mean, the places where we have speeding complaints, we're usually going to be there anyway. And it is, most of the vehicles we're talking about here, I do believe are going to be those that go out and buy the aftermarket mufflers to intentionally make their vehicles louder. The normal everyday off the dealer lots vehicles, they're probably not going to be loud enough to be in violation of this ordinance.